Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This episode, we got a bunch of people with us today. We even got like a special guest and the guest. Today, joining me, I'll start first with Heidi Love. What is going on, Heidi? How are you?
Hey, everybody. I'm good to be here. Thank you for having me. Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise. I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be with all of you guys.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you jumping on. And we got Ethan Indigo. Sir, please let everybody know what your deal is.
Well, it is my honor to be here, and I'm looking forward to exchanging ideas with everyone. And I'm a writer and so on and so forth, and an observer of all this crazy madness. So it's honored to be here with you guys.
Of course. No, I always appreciate you coming on, sir. And special guest joining us today with our guest is Miguel from Aeon Byte. I'm sure you all know who he is, but in case you don't, please, Miguel, let everybody know where they can find all your amazing work.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me on. Oh, simple. Look at my name, miguelconnor.com, and it's all there.
Yes, and if you haven't heard the Occult Elvis, please go check it out and check out that book. Some wild bugged out stuff. I'll be totally honest with you. There was a lot of stuff I had no idea about Elvis until Miguel told us. So please.
Yeah, so interesting.
Yes, and finally, we got Julia Gordon-Bramer. Am I saying it correctly again? I think I asked you last time.
You are.
All right.
Yep.
Awesome.
Long A, Bramer.
Yes, we got her back on again. We had a great time when she was on last time talking about Sylvia Plath. And I'll be totally honest with you, if it wasn't for Miguel, I would have never have known who this lady was. So that was the reason why I kind of even asked him to come on. But we got her today.
It's a book you must have, And it's a great book that I keep going back to. Yeah, and I have to laugh because what we're going up against, whether it's the Occult Elvis or Paul Wilde in his book about Jim Morrison, is this resistance to the spiritual world, the benefits. Because I remember I put out your podcast, Julia, and I put it on Facebook and other social media. And lo and behold, you got these people. Well, she just dabbled with it. It wasn't a big deal. I mean, it was just the resistance to the truth is incredible. So I'm sure you can really, and I get the same with Elvis. I mean, they turn their back on me like, no, he was a conservative Christian. You're just lying. And I'm like, but here's the data. You know,
isn't it crazy? Yeah, they just don't want to see it. They have their tunnel vision. Yeah.
And the funny thing with that is it's just like we're not saying they're a bad person for this, right? Like that's not the reason of the book. If anything, we're saying they were more intelligent and had more to offer to us than we thought they did, and people get upset with that. Now it's funny. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
But like Miguel said, definitely go check out that book. Check out the episode. It was a blast, and that's why we had to have her back on again. We had such a great time. So Julia, please let everybody know where they can find all the amazing stuff. And yes, we'll be talking about Tarot Life Lessons, which is another book of hers as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can find out anything about me on juliagordonbramer.com. And I'm on all the social networks. I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, X, all of that. So J Gordon Bramer on X and on Instagram. But where do you want to start here? I mean, gosh, I've been a tarot card reader for over 46 years now. I guess that's a place to start, right?
Yeah. That's what. I guess that was one of the reasons why you wrote a book on tarot.
Yeah, I wanted to write a book that, well, when I first wrote it, I mean, it came from my journal entries. So my working title was The Tarot Diaries, because I wrote it for myself. I wrote it with, I would have these incredible readings that I just didn't want to forget. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened, and something would come up. And as a writer, I'm also a creative writer and a poet. And I just wanted to capture the little vignettes for myself. And so I would just jot something down, and I would, when this card would come up, or I would see somebody's face change when they would recognize such and such with this other card. And, and I got down all those little moments, and it was the stories that floored me. They were a murder showed up, a covering up manslaughter showed up. addictions, you know, terrible addictions, gambling addictions, alcohol addictions, drug addictions. There was some really strange things where there was one situation where somebody was impersonating me, and and it like what has come up in the cards has been mind-blowing. And so what I did was I assembled them all in the order of the major arcana. And I just had a little fun with it. I learned that from Sylvia Plath, because all of Sylvia Plath's work that she assembled, including the Bell Jar, her novel, was all in this major arcana order. So she taught me, and I put all of my little stories together, and that became Tarot Life Lessons. So yeah, it was. They're all true. I wanted to write a book that I had never seen before about the tarot. You know, there's tons of how to read tarot books. I didn't want to write another one of those. You can look up, you know, what cards mean all over the place. You know, I wanted something to be different there.
Well, that's great, because my next question was going to be what makes this book different than all the other ones. So I guess you kind of answered that right there.
Yeah.
I was going to say everybody's got books on tarot to tell you how to read it. What makes yours different? So thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, it's real life stories. You know, it's kind of like when you're reading my book, you're sitting on my shoulder or in my head, and you're getting the story as you're understanding my thoughts and my feelings, and how I'm interpreting the cards.
Wow, this is interesting. Nice. Is there any, like, I guess maybe, is there any examples of things that you would want to bring up from that maybe you could think of, like?
Yeah. Sure. You know, well, like I said, you know, there's a lot of very different kinds of things that have come up. The very first story is my own story. It's in alignment with the Fool card and how I got into tarot, and how I found my own natural intuition, and my journey into mysticism of all kinds, and even the Sylvia Plath work is mentioned in there, because it's all been such a part of my spiritual journey. I definitely feel that Plath, in her way, called me maybe to the tarot initially, because when I was 16, that was when I also found the Bell Jar, and you know, and discovered her as a writer and a poet. So, which was the same age I found the tarot. So I kind of marvel at that, and I think, okay, maybe she was orchestrating this all along. but as you know, so I tell my own story in the first story in the Tarot Life Lessons, in alignment with the Fool. The second story, in alignment with the Magician. If you know anything about the tarot, the Magician is sometimes the con artist or the trickster, and it's the story of a scam artist who basically had convinced a woman on Facebook, a widow, to, you know, turn over her entire retirement. And I got very attached to this woman, and was really begging her to not do this. You'll see, you know, I form really interesting relationships with my clients, and some of them, you know, I care. And it's kind of a problem sometimes. I almost wish I didn't, because I can't run their lives for them. And especially when we get into something like that, or something like the gambling addict who is in the story with my Wheel of Fortune card. You know, I basically watching someone destroy her life with gambling. And, you know, there is a helplessness in reading the cards and seeing, you know, having people weep openly because they're recognizing what they're going through, and yet they seem incapable of stopping it. You know, that's the problem. I can show people what's going on, and I can give them guidance, but I can't fix it for them. And boy, sometimes I sure wish I could. But, you know, it's kind of like parenting that way, right? So there's lots of stories, lots of different kinds of stories. there's a man at a wedding, an older man, he was probably nearing 80, who his card showed that he'd never been loved at all. And the two of us were sobbing and holding hands, that he was the hermit. There's a lot of interesting things that have come up over all of these years that I've done this professionally. And almost all of them are my professional stories, although there are a couple that were personal readings that I did for friends, and they showed up as well. So there was a young man who had very severe ADHD and just kind of couldn't keep on task. So there's just I matched something to every one of the major arcana cards, and but it goes beyond just that one card, because you'll see the whole process, you'll see the whole reading, and how the reading unfolded, and how I interpreted what sometimes cards don't always mean what they supposedly mean. Sometimes we look at a card and we get an entirely different message from what the books might say, but that's in the intuitive part that I cover as well with Tarot Life Lessons. And every chapter has a tip at the end of it for people who are reading. So, so I think people tell me it's an interesting read, even if you know nothing about tarot, because you get a lot of good people stories and amazing stuff. And then if you do know tarot, it'll give you tips on how to be maybe a better tarot card reader, and or how to trust your intuition and how to step into it more, because I'm pretty seasoned doing this for over 46 years.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. So somebody who really doesn't know much about tarot, this book wouldn't be like out of their realm to be able to pick up.
No. In fact, a lot of male friends and my husband have read it, who don't have a tarot deck. They were just kind of interested in what the hell is it that I do, and why, and people sometimes think I'm conjuring spirits, or they kind of liken it to a Ouija board. And I want to dispel all of that. I explain in the book, it's more psychological. It's kind of like dream analysis in some ways, kind of just showing people what they already know on their highest level of consciousness, bringing it to the world's consciousness here, and giving them tools, really.
Does anybody want to ask any questions before I start asking more? Just want to ask.
That's just such a wonderful way to present the archetypes that unfold out of the cards, if you will. And I think that's a great way to almost intuitively learn what is an intuitive practice. So that's really awesome. Is there something Is there a quality or some kind of general philosophy or outlook that you might share that's not specific order of operations as far as your different types of readings, but just something you might impart on those looking to use the divination?
Yeah. So there's a lot in tarot, and a lot in my personal studies that I maybe infuse in my readings. I've been studying Buddhism for quite a number of years. Also read the Tao, and I think that some of those teachings and stories come into my readings on occasion. I have a background in the Episcopal Church, so I have a traditional Christian background, and I find the Bible endlessly valuable, although I may interpret the Bible different from a fundamentalist. Sure. I see the Bible as a seriously mystical book, and that might make some people uncomfortable, and I've been told make some people uncomfortable. I teach and study A Course in Miracles, which I would say is very close to Buddhism, and it's A Course in Miracles is kind of Buddhism with a Christian slant, because it's about owning your Christ consciousness and reaching your highest self, that God self, basically. And then finally, through the Plath work, I got opened up to Kabbalah. And so I really knew nothing about Kabbalah before the Plath work, except, I'd heard the term, and I knew like Madonna and Britney Spears had like little red bracelets on their wrists, that had something to do with Kabbalah. But I knew nothing about it. And as I got into the Plath work, that opened me up to understanding that Kabbalah is this kind of, divine blueprint that all of the occult systems fit onto, perfectly, and in the most amazing way, and in truly a divine way. And so mythology, alchemy, all of these things that I never really explored through the Plath work and through Kabbalah, I began to open up into those directions. And of course, the tarot embodies all of that. The tarot has an alchemical reading to each card, an astrological reading to each card. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, of course, made our modern tarot deck today, the Rider-Waite. And so all of that infuses my readings, because I will look at a card and, it'll mean a lot more than just what the books would say. I take it deeper, and I add lessons and kind of build into, I try to give my clients tools so that they can take away some guidance and not just have a fortune telling episode.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, and again, you beat me to it. I was gonna ask about incorporating the Kabbalah. I would just assume when you do that, it kind of, from my opinion, I think it helped me, obviously, when I started playing with tarot, but I could see you being able to maybe get much more of a life lessons or stories when you can kind of incorporate what's going on in the Kabbalah with where the card falls. I think it just gives it a much more deeper, richer understanding and story behind the art. And I love that. Was there anything that you saw popping up like over and over again that like made you think about like even doing this, writing this? I guess, was there a certain life lesson that have inspired you to do this?
Yeah. So I really just had my journals, which, were not all tarot recordings, that personal stuff, whatever. I had shared with my husband during COVID, that I had done all of, that I'd been recording some of these, and I would tell him some of these stories. I would come home and I'd be like, God, you wouldn't believe this party, and this people sat in front of me, and this happened, and this happened, and he was always saying, you need to write this down. And sometimes I would, and sometimes I would plan to write it later. And anyway, during COVID, we all had our downtime, and I said to Tom, yeah, maybe I'll go through my journals and assemble something. And so I put it in this book form, and I decided, well, it would be fun to tell my story up front as the fool, kind of play with that a little bit, just sort of falling into it. Because, of course, I never set out to be a professional tarot card reader. And, if anyone had, like, why would somebody choose a career that gets you virtually no respect out in the world, and challenged in academia and all of that stuff. But yes, so somehow it all just evolved and happened. And so I thought it would be fun to tell my story up front. And because everyone asks me, like, how do you become a professional tarot card reader, and so I did that. And interestingly, so I just had this book sort of put together, and I hadn't really planned even to send it out. But they say when we're in flow, when we're in synchronicity, everything unfolds. And I got a fan letter over on Instagram for my Sylvia Plath work. And this woman wrote me, and she said, I've read your first 3 books, and I'm fascinated by what you're doing. And do you have anything else coming out on Plath? And I said, well, it's interesting that you mention this, because I spent the last 15 years working on this biography on Platt's mysticism, but I wasn't finding a publisher for it. And I just kind of put it away. And I wrote this other book, just for fun. And she said, I want to introduce you to my friends over at Inner Traditions. And long story short, she gave me the introduction to the editor, and they snatched up both books. And so Tarot Life Lessons came out first in 2023, and the Occult Sylvia Plath came out in May of 2024. And what a gift. I mean, it just felt like very in sync. I didn't even try. And that's a God thing when it just unfolds like that. And they've been a wonderful publisher too. Just couldn't be happier with Inner Traditions, which on my book says Destiny Books. That's the imprint of Inner Traditions.
I've had so many of their authors on. If I ever go to publish a book, they better publish it for me.
Yeah, they're great.
No, they feed me so many people, and they're all great. So I appreciate it. No, it's awesome place for me to deal with. So another thing I did want to ask, I guess, like after doing this book, or while doing it, or like putting it together, did you ever kind of look at any of the major arcana a little bit differently now, from looking at like maybe a string of seeing it maybe show up differently in stories, and now you're like, this is a little weird or different for you?
I have been reading tarot for so many years that I may look at a card and the story might kind of jump in my head for a moment, but when I'm reading, I'm very connected to who I'm reading for. So it'll be their story, not necessarily mine. And so no, I wouldn't say that the book has changed my perception of the cards. When we're reading, we're channeling. Basically, we're very connected to that person, and and what they most need. And I'm asking Spirit to tell me what they need to see here. And and I do love the cards because they're so visual, and I can share that. And sometimes I won't know what I'm seeing, but I'll hold it up, and they'll know. They'll be like, oh my gosh, yes, of course, that makes perfect sense to me. Sometimes my clients don't explain to me what it means. It might be too personal. I've had that happen where I've said some words that I'm not even sure of what I'm speaking, and they are reduced to tears or something. And but they may keep it to themselves, and that's cool, because it's not my business. My business is just to give them the message.
Nice. Have you ever had, like, I guess when it comes to doing these readings and stuff, where you find yourself in a situation where I guess you don't want to instill fear and a little bit more of empowerment instead, so maybe you try to word the reading differently? Not differently, but try to like get more of empowerment, because sometimes people, I think, can also be very frightening with tarot.
Sure. I mean, it's not a responsible tarot card reader who says you're going to die next month, or that's now it could be if I were talking to someone with stage 4 cancer who was in hospice, and that might be all right, we gotta say our final words to the people we love, and that has happened actually. So that would be an extenuating circumstance, but in general, we don't tell people they're cursed, or that, I believe that I'm reading for you because we're connected just by being alive. I call that life force God. So, we are both hooked into that God system, and we have great power over our lives. And so if we see something coming up that we don't like, it's an opportunity to do it differently, So like I said, it's always a heads up. It's always an opportunity to shift into maybe a different behavior, or at least a different way to look at something. Sometimes we cannot change other people, or we cannot change world circumstances, but we can change our perception of it.
Have you ever been lied to by like spirits? I'm just curious. I mean, because I read John Dee, So
not by spirits. I've been lied to by my clients.
Right.
You know, I believe that I'm connecting with Holy Spirit. So I'm not going to get lied. You know, it's funny. People have asked me about Ouija boards, just to get on a little tangent for a second. I have a joke that, you know, that the Ouija board does not believe in me. and I say that because it's never worked for me. And I've had people who say, I'm a master at Ouija. You know, it's, you know, they claim they've channeled all kinds of things and gotten all kinds of spirits to show up. And every time I've sat down, which has been numerous times, it's just dead. It is nothing. And I realized that's because I am not open to random spirits. I only want source. I only want love and light. I don't want to contaminate myself with those dark energies. And so I've put that guard up, and it's not going to work for me. So I won't get lied to. A tricky spirit would lie, you know. now people lie.
Yeah.
And I have had situations which, you know, it's kind of funny where I'm thinking of 3 sisters that I read for at a kind of an outdoor fair event. And I read for one and they're like amazed. And I read for another and she's like, wow. And then the third one, she's like, no, not, doesn't sound like me. Not true. No, you know, and she's just poo-pooing the whole thing. Well, as soon as she got up, the other 2 sisters were like, don't believe her. She was lying. She's full, you know, and they said I nailed her, you know. So sometimes, you know, whether they're lying to themselves and they just don't want to see it, or whether they're just not wanting to admit it to me, you know. I've also had things where things like, you know, uncomfortable situations like affairs have come up. And people don't always want to admit something like that. You know, they kind of like, whoa. And I don't push it. Like, you know, I'm not asking for a confession. I'll just say what I see and they can acknowledge it or not, you know, but
that sister had some splaining to do or something. No, just kidding. Right.
I wonder, as you practice tarot, I mean, it's kind of a redundant question, but you might have some experiences that are not so. How much, as you practice tarot, how much does that kind of build on your random intuition or your intuition outside of tarot?
Yeah, well, you know, what I've learned when I was younger, tarot was my crutch, and I needed the cards. And as I've gotten older, and I mean significantly older, like I'm talking later 50s, I've realized that I'm in my early 60s now. I've realized that I have all that in me already, and I just didn't trust it. And so I'm better now at, you know, I'm what they call clairaudient. So I'm sure, you know, all your, you know, there's clairvoyant and clairsentient and clairaudient. So I hear it in my head. And yeah, you know, I've just learned that the cards are helpful. The cards are helpful because my clients like to see the pictures and they explain things, but I can do readings without the cards. I just like the cards, honestly, and my clients like the cards, and it validates it. You know, it to my clients, they're like, especially if they know me, it's one thing, you know, like I have some clients I've been talking to for 10, 15 years. And so they know me and they totally trust me and my abilities. But maybe somebody new might be like, well, she's just making shit up, you know? And so, but if I pull a card and hold that up and explain, then it's sort of like they get it a little more, you know, they can trust it a little more because they can see for themselves that this has come up.
I had 2 questions. I'm not sure which one I want to go with first because it's going to kind of change the tone. Was there any things that maybe you'd like to say? Because we were kind of saying it before. You know, I do want to, when it comes to tarot, I think to an extent there is like a little bit of you know, it doesn't have the best, I guess, name to it sometimes. Was there any like kind of things that maybe you wanted to like dispel or just say like certain things that seems to go on a lot?
Well,
Like it's not really like that or whatever.
right. A lot of people are afraid of it. You know, they think I'm conjuring spirits or demons, or they heard, you know, in their churches that it's evil. And you know, that's so crazy to me because I feel so God-centered in it. And I know now I have had fundamentalists tell me, well, that's Satan who's tricking you, you know. But wow, Satan has sure done a heck of a job with Holy Spirit, because I've seen really beautiful, positive, loving, wonderful things happen. It's never been dark. It's always been helping. It's my purpose. I mean, I'm here as a light worker, and I absolutely believe that. And so, you know, I am not wanting anything to do with satanic energy myself. I know a lot of people are, you know, they sort of lump it all in as occult and tarot, and you know, an occult, of course, just means it just means hidden, and it's what the masses are a little uncomfortable about. You know, getting back to when we were talking about, you know, the occult Elvis and the occult Jim Morrison, and you know, the stuff is sort of all coming out now, and and people are just really uncomfortable with what's not familiar. And so the occult is about it's very unfamiliar territory. But I do get people every now and then. There's a story in Tarot Life Lessons of when I was working a Renaissance fair, and some very gothy kids came in, and they were, you know, in their pentagram necklaces and their black eyeliner, and they're, you know, and they're like expecting like demon stuff, you know, and they wanted me to be all cool and demonic, you know. And boy, was I disappointing to them. And I shared a thing or two about their energies, because one of the things I have found is people who mess with that. I say, yeah, there's a certain amount of power in that. And if you look at the people who mess with that, they're almost all in very poor physical health. They're generally either obese or emaciated as well. It's a very interesting circumstance that I don't think you can mess with that dark energy and not be physically stripped of your physical power. It's very interesting. I want nothing to do with it.
But Julia, what do you think about the idea? And of course, there's memes and TikToks about it and documentaries. There is a dark side to New Age, and it's out there. Obviously, there's a shadow side to everything, and unfortunately,
Sure.
predators and hucksters, they go where they go. Could be a fundamentalist church, could be the New Age movement, and they are out there exploiting women, taking money from men, getting addicted to drugs. So it's always going to happen in any sort of arena. So what do you do to sort of watch out for it or warn others about it? Or
Yeah, well, you know, I think it's on a case by case basis, right? I was reading for a friend who became very upset because a girlfriend of hers has followed this man. He's sort of I don't know, he considers himself like a prophet or something, and he believes he's, you know, like possessed by an angel, and he's basically got this harem of women who he's got them all branding themselves with a kind of a tattoo, and they're all his concubines, you know, and and I'm like, what the hell, you know, stuff there's a lot of weird dark energy stuff that's right here in St. Louis, by the way. You know, the heart of the nation. But you know, I know have clients who get into, they've told me about things like orgies and Burning Man, and all good,
Oh wow.
It's not really my world, and I guess, I listen, and if I can offer advice on somebody to navigate in their own personal life, but every circumstance is different. So, there's definitely stuff going on.
Yeah. Well,
In the
I better take
guise
off.
of
Better take off my Nick tattoo. I hope nobody sees that one.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I still got the universal hexagram on my own. Oh well.
That's an interesting problem that you bring up, Miguel. And sometimes I'll point out to people that, at least for me personally, I don't pursue new age, I pursue old age, right? Where I'm actually looking for almost the carving on the wall or the hermetic scroll or whatever. The old age stuff is presented as new age and gets deformed or perverted for these guys,
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, that's perennial though. Yeah.
So I think I was going to say, even with tarot, and I think it just goes with everything. It all depends on the person using it, in my opinion, as well. I mean, it's really on the intentions on the user.
Absolutely.
I think it can be used for good things and it can be used for horrible things.
Yeah. Plus, there's no, as I always say, there's no guarantees. Once
Oh,
you
yeah.
open the door, there's no guarantees. And if you want to know the truth and know thyself, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be pain and ego, death, and adjustment. Some people want, as somebody said, they don't want transformation. They just want their broken toys mended. And they end up in that attitude and they go down the wrong path. So it's supposed to be, as somebody else said, mysticism is supposed to be destructive by definition. It's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Tower card, right? And and on the Tower card, the crown is knocked off, which is, of course, the ego. And and I like to say the foundation is wrong and the building has to come down, and it's time. The next card in the series is the Star, which is our hopes and our dreams, everything coming true, after that destruction of the ego. So yeah, it's all part of it. And it isn't easy to face this inner stuff, and not everybody asks for it. And that's another reason why people are not always comfortable with the tarot, I guess. They don't want to see the truth, they don't want to see how they really feel. It's much easier to just numb that out with distractions or addictions,
Yeah, that's why I like Course of Miracles. I see it as very Gnostic because it does teach that everything is a projection. And I always like, damn it. Everything I say, it is true. Every time I get mad or jealous or fearful, or I have to look within because I am projecting something from another life. Sure, people are wrong and mean, but I am participating in some way or another. So it's not easy.
I was going to say, I think Julia found that 1 out of 3 are going to deny it, right? In your story of the 3 sisters, they're, 1 out of 3 people going to not want to hear the lessons that they must face.
Oh yeah, that's kind of an interesting little analogy, right? Out in the world. Yeah. But those 2 out of 3 are willing and doing the work, and maybe that's hopeful for the world today. I do believe most people want to do good and be decent people, maybe not everyone, but most people. So it's part of part of the.
Yeah, Meatloaf did sing 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So maybe, right? Who would bring Meatloaf to an occult discussions? Nobody but me, right?
Yeah, I love 2 out of 3
that.
ain't bad.
That was the best. The Meatloaf interview with Dan Rather was one of the best interviews I've ever seen. The guy had such a life.
I've never seen it.
Oh yeah, he's got the big interview. It's a show Dan Rather did, and yeah, look up Meatloaf. What a life! Guy was amazing. Will trip you out.
Wow.
I'll have to check that out. Really don't know much about the guy at all.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
There's
May
a
I ask-
rumor I have to check, and I don't know if it's true because I'm getting so much information about Elvis, but there's a story that Elvis was originally going to play Meatloaf's character in the Rocky Horror Show. He would have been more Elvis, but I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah. I don't think the timing's right. I think Elvis was dead before Rocky Horror came out. Because I remember when Elvis died, I was probably about 13 when Elvis died. And I feel like Rocky Horror came out a couple years after that. Because I was at the theater seeing Rocky Horror.
Oh, those were great shows. Yeah, no, Rocky Horror was 1975, so it was before Elvis, so I don't know if it's any true, but yeah, I love the Rocky. Going to one of those were a lot of fun, Julie, until they got all, I don't know, politically correct. Because when we used to go, it was a wild thing. People were throwing stuff and dancing. It was out of control. And then suddenly it was like, oh no, you have to stay in your chair. We'll give you the bag of throwing popcorn. You can't get on stage and dance with, Dr. Frankenfurter like the old, it just became really sterile, and I stopped going. I wanted it became like a mosh pit sometimes.
We were the same era. Yep.
Yeah, it was a blast. But we can't have fun things, as they say. It's just
not anymore.
Can't do the time warp anymore.
What is this world? No wonder this world's falling apart.
No more time warp. Ethan, you wanted to ask?
I was going to ask a sort of technical question as a neophyte, and I hope the question is not misguided as a neophyte. But could you present maybe the characteristics of each of the 4 suits, if you will, of the tarot? The swords, staffs, pentacles, and wands. If cups, excuse me, if they do share characteristics, or maybe they're all different in the numbers.
Yeah, they're different. I like to point out that they align with a regular deck of playing cards. So some people ask, like, how can fortunes from a regular deck of playing cards? And I can do that because they match. So the wands would match with the clubs in a regular deck of cards. And wands are about energy and enthusiasm. Typically, creativity is also part of that. So when I see wands, I know that it's a high energy kind of situation, or a creative or an imaginative situation, or something I'm enthusiastic about. Cups are love and emotion. They tend to have water in them, so it's about flowing and an expression. And so cups are in alignment with the hearts in a traditional deck. Swords would be in alignment with the spades in a traditional deck. And that would be swords are about striking out. They're about actions. They can also be about decision making, because swords are sharp. And then are those gold coins, and that is money and the things of earth, and that would be in alignment with the diamonds in a traditional deck of cards. So all of those suits, they have those main properties. And then we've got in the minor arcana, we've got the numbers. Would be akin to ones, the new beings. Twos, they tend to be partnerships, relationships. So like a 2 of cups is a very loving partnership. A 2 of wands is a partnership, like going out into the future with some enthusiasm, but then it gets a little weird. Like 2 of swords can be sort of like a stalemate kind of thing. So it isn't quite as simple as one number means just one thing, but each number has the numerological properties that are matched with those suits, and it expands on the meaning. And then, of course, we're looking at the meaning of the pictures in the cards. So when I let me get a minor arcana card. So I got like the Three of Pentacles here. And this is a promise or a commitment. And you can see it looks like a marriage, in fact, you know, vows. And so, so when this shows up, it's about making a commitment toward the direction of your life. So it could be marriage, or it could be signing on the dotted line to buy a car, or it could be committing to do a job of some kind, or in reverse, letting go of a job of some kind, you know. So so they all have their meanings within the numbers and their meanings within the suits, going beyond those major arcana cards like the Hanged Man, the famous ones that we know from Hollywood, you know, the Fool, the Lovers, Death, that kind of, those are the major arcana cards.
That was such a wonderful explanation. You just completely de-occulted tarot. That was wonderful.
I like how you tied it to playing cards.
Thank you. Yeah, well, anybody can read fortunes. It lacks a lot because, of course, you don't have the major arcana, which are the milestones. But if you know the basics, if you've learned the number system, and you maybe remember what the actual tarot cards look like. So I pull out a Four of Clubs and I'm thinking a Four of Wands, you know. And so in my Four of Wands mind, I'm thinking, okay, it's like a neat little house and a happy family and everything's in order. And so it's about order and having everything in place at home. And so Four of Clubs, that doesn't have any pictures on it except the Four Clubs, but I can relate it to that. So that's how we do it if we're reading from a regular deck of cards.
Now I know you had mentioned before, you know, the Kabbalah, and tying it to the Kabbalah. I guess, do you want to like give maybe the listeners a little bit of an idea of how you do that? I mean, I know I've mentioned it on my show plenty of times, maybe hearing it from somebody else. You know, how do you attribute the cards onto the major arcana to the tree? Oh, we having a problem here? Did you hear me, Julia?
I lost you there. You disappeared for a few seconds there. So I heard you say, do I want to give the listener? And then I lost it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to give maybe the listener a little bit of an idea of how you attribute the major arcana to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life.
Well, it fits. I mean, if you were to look up online, you can see, and you can, anyone can do a search and see how the tarot fits on the Kabbalah Tree of Life. There is a card for each of the Sephirot, which are the main stations of the Kabbalah Tree of Life. A card for each pathway connecting the Sephirot. It all fits together in this incredibly beautiful system. And I do not profess to be an expert Kabbalist. I wonder if anyone can be, honestly. No. It's such a journey, or it's such a journey to learn Kabbalah, and there's so much to it. As I understand, they say that no one is even capable under 40 years old. And it traditionally, it was always a man's pursuit, which I find very interesting. But you know, in the books I've read on Kabbalah and the copy of the Zohar, and you know, I dip into it and I use it much like any other kind of scripture, and just learn from it. So you know, I remember learning about addiction in the Kabbalah, and about how it was our favorite distraction to keep ourselves numb so that we don't feel our feelings. You know, that just little lessons that I've picked up from Kabbalah. But I think it, you know, it's a very involved, deep study. We're talking about the dark side. There's that whole Klipoth, that other shadow side in the Kabbalah Tree of Life. Some people have devoted their lives just to studying that. you know, it's all fascinating, and it's a map of creation, and I think it's an understanding of how the God system works and how the universe was created. And it's you can go as high level and superficial as you want, or as deep as you want. And some people have gone so deep that, you know, they've been accused of going into madness. And yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. But I think that it's got something for almost everyone. It's the system that all of the occult sciences operate on. It's the organizational blueprint for astrology and mythology and alchemy and tarot, and and it's just how the system works, and it's fascinating. And it does not vary. You know, every occult science seems to fit into this in a most amazing way.
Yeah, that's just like what Crowley 777 kind of does. Shows you how everything can be matched onto that. Miguel, what is your thoughts on the Kabbalah? Like, have you ever heard that whole theory with 40? You should wait till you're in your 40s, and that, you know, the shit can, like, you know, basically drive you crazy. You've heard those theories too, I'm assuming.
No, yeah. I mean, again, there's no guarantees, and like the shaman going into the underworld, which is what any mystic or tarot reader does, you are going down into the spirit world, and it's not a safe place. It's a dangerous place. You have to be centered. You have to be prepared. You have to, you have to know the risk you're taking. So, and of course, the Kabbalah, there are many types of Kabbalah. So that's hard. The Zohar is, of course, a monster book to even get into. I know Elvis gave it a crack. I think Larry Geller was the one who probably, you know, who had some experience and helped him and saw it. His attitude was just code. That was Elvis's way of seeing things. You know, it's, if I find the code in astrology and numerology and all this, I can break the code of reality and get closer to God, which was his centering, or what he wanted. So I think it's a good way to approach things. But yeah, you never know. You just never know. It's a risk.
Yeah. That's a good question, a good point to make, Julia. And I wanted to ask you this. I guess for yourself, and from doing this, you know, tarot, or I guess, you know, being into the occult or mysticism, whatever we want to call it, would you say for yourself, I mean, you have to keep your own house in order, or you're no good to anybody?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I warn people a lot about just getting guidance or advice from any any person. I mean, would you go to an accountant if they didn't have their finances in order, right? Like, that's crazy, you know. And you want to, if you're seeking advice, I know so many people who are, I'm going to be a life coach, and I'm like, really? Knowing that they can't get relationships, you know, successfully managed, and they maybe have money problems, and this problem and that problem. I mean, you just it's amazing how many people hang up a shingle that don't have their house in order. And so I never want to be a hypocrite, you know. I am not perfect, not by a long stretch. But I'm doing my best to be a good person. And yeah, and it is something that you know, how can someone teach or guide when they're not on that path already? I don't think it's possible, you know.
What about I do the I Ching. The tarot is not my thing, and I like the I Ching because it tends to be pretty slaps you in the face and will scold you if you try to play around with it. So it's not easy for my ego to try to game the I Ching. because that's what egos does. And my wife, like you, has been doing tarot for like 30 years. She's a devout Catholic, and she doesn't even rationalize. It's just something, it called her, and that's just the way it is. But she's really good at tarot, and she always says
Yeah.
how she works it is simple. She says every client knows the answer deep within them. They know everything. They are part of God,
Right.
like I am. So they know, we all know what our problems are. It's a matter of facing. We all have the ability to look behind the veil. So her job is to sort of teach them that you know the answers. I'm just here guiding you.
Yeah. You know, my husband used to sit behind my tent at the Renaissance Fair when I did the St. Louis Renaissance Fair way back. And he used to eavesdrop sometimes on my readings. And he would say, "You're not telling them anything they don't already know." And I said, right, they needed to hear it. They needed to be validated. They needed, you know, somebody to see it. And then they go, "Oh, right. Yes, of course." And that's, it's just bringing it to their full consciousness.
Yeah, the answers are within us.
I was thinking that there may be kind of a twofold reasoning for the 40 idea. I heard recently that Jung wouldn't even accept people if they weren't over 40 because he just found them uninteresting. So maybe there's one reason that we just don't know so much. But the Bible kind of infers all these 40 days and 40-year initiation processes, if you will, right? To where there's something about being able to handle yourself in the world when you go through either a 40-day or 40-year cycle.
I will say for my kids, they have no interest in any of my stuff. Like they're like, "Yeah, you're boring. Change the channel." But they're all young. Yeah. Not young, like almost 30.
Getting back to Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes were both under 40 when they began their journey into Kabbalah, as I have shown. And Sylvia, of course, died when she was 30. And you know, the punishment, according to Kabbalists, is, you know, first of all, you're supposed to be over 40 and you're a man. And the punishment is supposedly madness. And I find that very interesting, given, you know, what happened to Plath. And some might say Hughes went a little mad too in his way, differently mad. But you know, he had his demons, especially after Plath died, which was part of the story of my Occult Sylvia Plath book. But that whole Kabbalah facet is pretty interesting. You know, just, you know, if you believe that there's a punishment for digging in, I don't know. Like I said, I don't believe that stuff can touch me. I'm love and light and positivity here, but I can see going in too deep and getting too dark.
Yeah, I like the when Kabbalah originally started, it was a lot closer to sort of Gnostic. It was very dualistic. It was all about demons versus the light powers and Samuel and Lilith, and it was hardcore stuff. And I always liked, you know, the more punk rock religions, which that's how they start. I think even Buddhism or so forth. And then it sort of, as it grew and it developed, it started moving out and making it more palatable. And then you know, you get to the new age Madonna stuff, which is like, oh my God. But obviously Kabbalah had to go underground for a while because of a Shabbatai Zevi, which, you know, humiliated an entire religion. This guy who was just, he was Jim Morrison and the Elvis of his time. He was just out of control mystic who had millions of people thinking he was the Messiah. So it's it's powerful stuff, but hey, anything else is average, as they say.
Funny that you mentioned him. Didn't Blavatsky say that he like used the most like screwed up version, a perverted version of the Kabbalah?
Well, it's like, you know how it is with religion. It's interpretations.
Yeah.
You know? started interpreting the Talmud and the Torah, and the Messiah must go into darkness to rescue the sparks. And he was like, "Oh, does that mean I need to drink and have sex with other girls?" You know what I mean? It's like, well, I guess you could say that, but that's not what we rabbis do. And he was like, "Oh no, I'm in. I'm in." The redemption by sin, like Crowley and some of the Gnostics used to say. So, not my bag. I'm sorry, but you could see it happening. So,
jeez, one woman's enough. Jesus Christ. Julia, is there anything about the book that you would really like to, I guess, maybe talk about or cover before we get to wrapping it up soon? Maybe, or anything important that you would like to touch on? No, might be having a delay.
You're asking
again.
me?
Yes. Sorry, there might have been a delay again. Oh yeah, I was asking you about the book.
I'm sorry. What about the book?
Yeah, if there was anything about the book that you might have wanted to maybe mention or talk about or bring up before we start to wrap it up.
Yeah. I'll just say that I also recorded it on audiobook. So for those who aren't readers of paper books anymore, I recorded it in my own voice. That was important to me. I wanted to read my own work, and it took a little bit of acting, because it's you don't just read something flat when you record an audiobook. But I had fun with it, and so you can get it on Audible or any of the audiobook sites, as well as just buying a paper copy of it. And I've had a lot of new clients from my book. They've read my book and then they wanted to get readings from me in person, and some of them have had lessons from me online, as they've read my book, and they're like, okay, tell me how you would do the spread, and and we go over things, and I'm happy to do that with people as well.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Maybe one more question, and then if anybody else has a question, they can go, and then we'll wrap it up. And not to put too much pressure on you, but maybe if you could trying to think of an easy way to word this. Is there maybe one card from the major arcana that you noticed throughout doing this book that maybe you could touch on, and how you saw it, what it meant, the meaning of it to you throughout this book? Maybe the Tower or the Lovers or something, whichever one. But
so because I had a different story for each card, there isn't one dominating card. There's one dominating card for each story.
Yeah.
But not throughout the book. I could say my favorite major arcana card, and that would be Strength. It's this beautiful woman, and she tames the beast. She tames the lion. It's supposed to be the Nemean lion, Hercules' lion, and that lion almost killed him. But she triumphs not with brutality, but with love and gentleness in her character, and I always tell my clients that's them when that card shows up. And sometimes when Strength is in reverse, I say, you may be doubting your own strength. You may be very, very tested, but nobody gets the Strength card who isn't strong enough. So that's one of my favorite cards.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Ethan, Heidi, or Miguel, did you have anything that you wanted to ask before we wrap it up?
Just thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was very insightful, and I love the idea of soft strength that you just kind of put forth.
I like that.
Yeah, I just want to end. So, how do you think? Do you think Sylvia
from having been on your show before?
Yeah. But how do you think? Do you think Sylvia is being served? Do you think your book is slowly making progress, or how has it been received?
I do. Interestingly, when I went to London last year, I had 2 standing room only events in London, and boy, that is my city. The Londoners, they're into mysticism, they're readers, and they love Plath. So it's like the perfect combination of energies. So I can't wait to go back, and I'm talking to one of those bookstore owners about that just as soon as I can. But you know, the book is selling steadily, and it seems to have, I really think, more of an international appeal than a national appeal. It's doing okay here nationally, but it's in Britain and Australia and New Zealand and, you know, Netherlands. That's where people are buying it, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
I just think Americans are not readers anymore, you know, and which is really a sad thing to say, but it seems to be true. I know a lot of people who tell me they don't read, almost proudly, you know. It's just how it is.
That, and I will say, as much as and you know what I think it is maybe because of the communities we're around, we tend to think that there is a lot of people open to this, but my belief, I still don't think the United States is as open to the occult as some other countries are. You know, that stuff is kind of just almost like plain day. So that could maybe have something to do with it too, actually, believe it or not.
Yeah.
I still visibly see shock in people's faces if I merely say the word in whatever context one might imagine. If I say occult, they just kind of veer back.
Yeah.
Well, the word doesn't even make sense anymore, and I know. Like the word pagan or something. Like, what does it even mean anymore? And there's nothing that's occulted, and paganism used to be a derogatory term for non-Christians. But what's a pagan? Is an African animist and a Buddhist a pagan? So sometimes, I think our language is also failing us. That's why, you know, people like Jung or Crowley or so many others are like, we need new words, new languages to open up our consciousness. But we're still, you know, we're still hanging on to these words. That's why the publisher called it the Occult Sylvia Plath and the Occult Elvis, because that's what works still, but the word doesn't work.
Right.
It works for the people who are looking. So
yeah, exactly.
But thank you all for coming on. Real quick before we wrap it up, Miguel, remind everybody where they can find your amazing show, please, and all your work.
Yeah, right now just go to miguelconnor.com and it's kind of a which way Western man. You can go the Occult Elvis way in my Substack, or you can go to Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio for all the Gnostic heresies podcasts and all that stuff. So that's where you should go.
Awesome. Great stuff. And thank you so much for jumping on. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. And Heidi, please let everybody know where they can find you.
I am Heidi Love of the Unfiltered Rise podcast. Everywhere podcasts are served. I do have my own website, unfilteredrisepodcast.com, and you guys can catch me there. Thank you, everyone that was here today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And Ethan Indigo, please.
Thank you so much for involving me in this great conversation. You guys, I loved hearing your insights. And I'm on the usual social media and so forth. And I just dropped an article about the Circumpunct on Occult Research Institute, so check that out. Thank you so much.
Ethan's going to be on Aeon Byte at the beginning of June. He's going to talk about Taoist themes in Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Awesome.
Just kidding.
I was like, I know actually.
No, we'll have fun. We'll have fun at all.
That's right. That's great. And Julia, please let everybody know where they can find you and let them know about all the books that you have.
Yeah. Well, I have 5 books altogether, but my 2 latest are Tarot Life Lessons that we talked about, and look up all my books on Amazon, just Julia Gordon-Bramer, or website juliagordonbramer.com. And I'm on all the social networks. I'm on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Gordon-Bramer for love to connect.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you broke up a lot on that, but yes, you have the Occult Sylvia Plath, you have the Tarot Life Lessons, and you can find her on Instagram and Twitter. I'll put all those links in the bottom if they're not there now. I know I do have your website at least. Julia, thank you so much for coming on. It was a great talk like last time. We'll have to have you on again in the future or whatever. Yeah, and we appreciate it. And again, thank you everybody in the chat. That's what's up. That's why I went live. It was great to see you all there, and I appreciate it. Thank you, Donald. Like I said, I just sent you out stickers today. I'm gonna have to send you like another box. I appreciate that super chat. Yeah, and until the next one, everybody be well. Later.